What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to examine Uncanny X-Men Annual 5, which was brought to you by all of these people if you are looking for someone to blame for this awful, awful issue. Over the course of me examining issues of the X-Men, I cannot remember the last time that I hated an issue as much as I hated this annual. This was bad. I don't think there is a single redeeming aspect of this story. So let me just get right into it. So we start with the Fantastic Four in the Baxter Building, and Sue Storm looks like she came right out of the 1950s. She's wearing an apron. She has slaved over the stove, and supper is ready, but nobody has come to supper, and so now it's ruined, and she's just like, these men, you guys can just live on junk food for all I care. And this is weird, because Chris Claremont, you get the feeling that he is pretty attuned with late 70s, early 80s feminism. He writes a lot of the female characters as very strong-willed and independent, not just in the X-Men. You get the feeling, even this early in his X-Men run, that Storm is one of his favorite characters, and he's already elevated Kitty Pryde into being a prodigy. She is as smart as Reed Richards, seemingly. At one point, she says she understood everything that Reed Richards said about some science thingamajig. So already you can tell Chris Claremont, he enjoys writing the female characters, and they're not just the token girl. You look at early 60s Fantastic Four, where Reed is the smart one, and then the Thing is the muscle, and Johnny is kind of the hothead, and then Sue is the woman. And that was kind of true for a lot of comics in the 60s. You look at the early Hulk stuff. Betty Ross doesn't have much of a personality other than being the woman in the comic. And that was not really true when Chris Claremont started writing. Like I said, it wasn't just an X-Men. He briefly wrote Iron Fist, and he really made Colleen Wing and Misty Knight feel more like real characters. And then he wrote some solo stuff with them in Daughters of the Dragon, and they felt like characters and not just the female extension of a male-centric series. And so this feels very 1950s, like the Fantastic Four, get back in the kitchen, Sue, and order us some pizza if the food is ruined. And it just doesn't feel like it comes out, I don't know, it just is weird. But anyway, there is an alert in the Fantastic Four's headquarters. There is a woman out on the street firing a laser gun, and she is a Shi'ar person. I don't remember her name, and she is just firing this gun everywhere. And it turns out she is being chased by invisible agents of the Badoon. The Badoon are a lizard-like alien species that was introduced in the Silver Surfer series in the late 60s. They had also showed up in the future in the Guardians of the Galaxy stories, and now here they are. It turns out they have taken over Archon's world, in whatever dimension Archon lives on. We saw him a couple of annuals ago. They have taken over Archon's world, and somehow the Shi'ar are involved. And I just finished reading this issue less than 5 minutes ago, and I don't understand how the Shi'ar are involved, because other than this woman, there are no other Shi'ar in the issue. But somehow the Badoon are trying to take over the Shi'ar Empire. They're trying to take over Earth, and they've already taken over Archon's world. So this woman escaped to Earth somehow, and she is firing a laser gun, seemingly at the invisible agents of the Badoon. But then she's also firing it, like at one point, there's an Earthman carrying a boombox, and she shoots at the boombox for some reason, and she can see the Badoon through the sight in the laser gun, but then she's still firing at everything and everyone. At one point, she hits the Thing, and I guess she's just not a good shot, maybe? I don't know. The woman is wounded, and then she is able to give a warning to the Fantastic Four. She says, Archon, Badoon, danger, X-Men, Xavier. And then the Badoon is like 0.03 inches away from Reed and the wounded Shi'ar person, and he is talking out loud, but apparently Reed can't hear her, and then he kills the woman, and then he wounds the men of the Fantastic Four. The police come in, and they apparently don't know who the Fantastic Four are, so they're like, hey, you guys, you're under arrest. The Fantastic Four, 3 of them are captured by the Badoon. Sue escapes, and then she grabs Franklin, and she goes to the Xavier mansion. I have no idea when the Fantastic Fantastic Four actually found out that Xavier is the leader of the X-Men, because just reading the X-Men comics, the last time the Fantastic Four featured that I recall was like when the Juggernaut was first introduced, and Xavier telepathically recruited Johnny Storm. He didn't really do anything to help, and then Professor Xavier wiped Johnny's memories of who the X-Men were. So at some point in between that issue and this issue, the Fantastic Four know that Professor Xavier is one of the X-Men. So then we cut to the X-Mansion, and Storm is having nightmares that she and the X-Men are fighting with Archon against the Badoon. And she wakes up and she's stressing over what these nightmares could mean. And then she hears Sue Storm out on the porch, and then Sue tells the X-Men what she heard, and then Storm tells everyone about her nightmares. And so Cyclops, he's just hanging out here. We don't see Lee Forrester anywhere. The last we saw in the main series, Cyclops was still on sabbatical from the X-Men, but now Professor Xavier says, Scott, what are you going to do? You're the leader of the X-Men. And I know later on there is going to be some tension between Storm and Cyclops, and also I think between Storm and Professor X, because she was leading the X-Men, and now that Scott is back, and suddenly Scott is being deferred to as the leader of the X-Men. We don't get any of that in this annual, but I expect to see a little bit more of that in later issues. So Scott says, okay, we're going to go to Archon's world, and we're going to try to rescue Archon's world from the Badoon. So they get there, and then Storm says, hey, it's Sasha. Sasha works for the Grand Vizier, who works for Archon. She's a friend of ours. This is awful. I do not remember Sasha from the last time that Archon showed up, and I am assuming that she wasn't actually in the last Archon issue, and that's why Storm is resorting to what Brandon Sanderson calls maid and butler dialogue, where the maid says to the butler, as you know, the lord of the house is having an affair with a woman who lives down the street, saying something to someone that the character already knows, but they're providing exposition for the audience. And since Storm is using maid and butler dialogue, I can only assume that Sasha wasn't actually in that issue, and so fans would have no idea who Sasha is, so Storm has to explain to the fans, this is who Sasha is. And then she says it was her who sent the nightmares to Storm, hoping that it would bring the X-Men here. Now, normally, you don't need two completely separate, unrelated, inciting incidents to kick your heroes off on a story. This issue would have played out exactly the same if it just had the Badoon is chasing a woman, and then the Fantastic Four get kidnapped, and then Sue Storm goes to the X-Men and says, hey, Archon, let's go, and then they go there. You didn't also need the issue, or the page of Storm having a nightmare, and then Sasha just offhandedly says, yeah, that was me. It just really feels like they are stretching this issue out as much as they can, and they need about 40 pages, so how can we add a few extra pages? Well, what if Storm is having a nightmare for one page, and then Sasha says that she gave her the nightmare, but then it's Sue Storm who tells the X-Men about this, and then she is the reason that they go on this adventure. And for that matter, I don't really know why the Shi'ar are involved here. It could have just as easily been one of Archon's people who is running around trying to find the X-Men, and then they get killed, but they pass the message on to the Fantastic Four. Because Sasha says that she and that Shi'ar person both had separate, independent plans to try and get some people from Earth to come and rescue them. She apparently was not working with Sasha, and Sasha was not working with her, and it doesn't matter because the X-Men came anyway with Sue Storm. You didn't need both of these inciting incidents to bring the X-Men here. It just feels really sloppy. So then Sasha explains that the Badoon came and conquered them somehow, even though Archon's people are a warrior race. I don't know. And then Cyclops says, okay, we are going to split up into 3 teams. Storm and the Invisible Woman are going to go and rescue the Fantastic Four. Kitty, Cyclops, and Colossus are going to be on standby, and they are going to be backup in case Sue and Aurora need help. And then Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and Sasha are going to go and destroy the Stargate, which is bringing more people, more Badoon to this world, and supplies to this world. And so if they can cut off the Stargate, then they're cutting off their weaponry, and they're cutting off more personnel that they're going to have to deal with. This makes me think that Cyclops may have hit his head at some point when he was working on Lee Forster's boat, because tactically speaking, this is the worst plan that I have ever heard in my life. Why don't you have Sue, who has the ability to turn invisible, which is very advantageous when you are wanting to be stealthy, have her sneak into the room where the other members of the Fantastic Four are being held captive, and then she can release them without causing too much of a scene, because the Badoon are not going to be able to see her. And then have everyone else in your group go and destroy that Stargate simultaneously, and then that will cut off all the other Badoon who are going to be coming here and bringing more weapons. You send you send Wolverine and Nightcrawler, two members who probably have the least amount of raw power to destroy a giant device like this, to go and destroy the device. Storm, Colossus, Kitty Pryde, all of them, I think Cyclops, any one of them by themselves would have a better chance of destroying a giant Stargate than Wolverine and Nightcrawler. What is Nightcrawler going to do? Teleport at it? Now, he does end up shooting a laser into it a whole bunch of times, and that overloads it, but you know what Kitty can do? Disrupt mechanical objects when she phases through them. Electronics go fritzy whenever she phases through them. She could have done this by herself. Why did you send the two least qualified people to destroy the Stargate, and then Cyclops, Colossus, and Kitty are apparently just hanging out on standby, waiting for Storm and the Invisible Woman to maybe need their help? The Invisible Woman could have handled the rescue on her own. She did not need Storm. And they go in, they pull a Wizard of Oz or a New Hope, where they dress up like exotic dancers who are going to entertain the leader of the Badoon, and then once they're inside, Sue blows their cover, and then she and Storm rescue the Fantastic Four and Archon, and then it's just a big mess. Tactically, none of this makes any sense. I feel like this issue could have been done in half the number of pages if Cyclops just used his brain a little bit, but they really want to stretch this out as long as they can, so Cyclops divides the team up in a way that makes absolutely no sense, and then eventually they all join forces, and then we are seeing something very similar to Storm's dreams, where they are all joined forces fighting the Badoon, and then eventually the leader of the Badoon says, "Hey, I've set up a bomb. I am somehow going to teleport off this world," even though the Stargate has already been destroyed by this point. I don't know how he's teleporting off this world. He says, "Somehow I'm going to teleport off this world, but you guys are going to get blown up." And then Reed is able to deactivate the bomb, and then Archon, he's like, "Hey, we did it." Oh, and I forgot to mention, while Wolverine and Nightcrawler and Sasha are going to go and disable the Stargate, Nightcrawler says, "Now, hang on a second, Wolverine. You're not going to use your claws, are you?" And Wolverine says, "Yeah, you idiot." Number one, that's his powers. And if Wolverine says, "I'm not going to use my claws," you effectively could have sent Maury McTaggart on this mission. You might as well have, if you're going to tell Wolverine not to use his claws. But he says, "We're in a war, and I'm a soldier. And I don't see you asking Sasha not to kill people." And Nightcrawler's like, "Well, to kill people, you can't take that lightly, even someone as evil as the Badoon. I just want you to think about that, Wolverine." Like less than 10 issues from now, when Storm seemingly kills Callisto of the Morlocks, I don't see Nightcrawler chastising her for that. It just feels really weird. Again, it feels like they're stretching this issue out. I don't know why Nightcrawler takes now of all times to tell Wolverine that he shouldn't be killing people. I don't get it. And then there is a large group of warriors from Archon's people, and the leader says, "I'm going to wait for you three to go and disable the Stargate, and then my people will come and we will help you." Now, Sasha apparently has some mystical powers because she is able to make herself and Wolverine look like Badoon. She is not able to make Nightcrawler look like a Badoon. Apparently, her powers have limits. 2, she can do. 3, she cannot do. Okay. But then Nightcrawler teleports over there, and Wolverine mentions it's always daylight in this world, so Nightcrawler cannot sneak over there in the shadows. But then they go over there, and then there is an army of Badoon that they have to deal with, and I'm thinking, man, it's too bad we don't have some of Archon's people over there, like hundreds and hundreds of them, who could have come over here, and they could have helped take the Stargate. It's too bad that they're just sitting there there not doing anything. So anyway, eventually the bomb gets defused, and then the Badoon, they're all, I guess they're all dead, and Nightcrawler doesn't have anything to say about that. And so then they're all celebrating. The Thing is arm wrestling with Colossus. I forgot to mention, at one point, Colossus is fighting this monster called the Monster of the Badoon, and he calls Kitty Katarina. He has never before or after this issue called her Katarina. Now, that might actually be the Russian name for Catherine, which is Kitty's full name, but most of the time he either calls her Katya or Kitty. He's never called her Katarina. I don't know if maybe Claremont is just trying something out here. And I forgot to mention also, since I'm just talking about everything I hate in this issue, Kitty has another awful costume that she wants to use, and then Professor X says, just go get your real costume. And so I was wondering a few issues ago when Kitty had that really awful costume, if Cockrum and Claremont were deliberately having Kitty make her own awful costume for some reason. I assume that is what they are doing, since in that issue, Nightcrawler said, yeah, that costume's kind of garbage, and then in this issue, all of them are like trying to hold back laughter at Kitty's costume, which kind of looks like something a fantasy princess would wear. And then later at the end of the issue, when the Thing and Colossus are arm wrestling, Kitty is wearing something that kind of sort of looks similar, and Colossus is just like, oh, like a cartoon wolf, eyes popping out of his head. Again, Colossus is about 18 at this point, and Kitty is like 13. It's really gross. It would make a little bit more sense if Kitty was crushing on Colossus and he was kind of ignoring it, but he has recently been kind of crushing on her also, and it's just, no, let's just not do that. And then Archon asks Storm, well, he says, I was going to ask you to stay here and be my queen, but I'm not going to do it because it would tear you apart to be taken away from your X-Men, just as it would tear me apart to be taken away from my people. And I just don't care. These two have had an issue where they met each other before. They barely spent any time together in this issue, so I don't count this issue. So they have had one issue where they have spent some time together, and this is trying to make us feel like this is a lot like Lilandra and Professor X, where Judy is getting in the way of their love, and I just don't care. I don't care about Archon. I don't care about this relationship because it has not had time to develop. If you're going to waste 40-something pages on this story, you could have at least had Storm and Archon get to spend some time with each other, and Claremont, he's pretty good with the character stuff. He could have probably made this relationship feel a little bit more authentic, but he didn't, because this issue is complete and total butt. Everything about it is awful, and I hated it, and I absolutely hate reading the annuals, and that means that the next issue I'll be examining is another annual, Avengers Annual 10. I've read that one once before. You've probably heard of it. That is the introduction of Rogue. So that's all for X-Men Annual 5. So come in next time as I talk about another annual. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day, and let's consider this one examined.